Welcome back to our discussion of ACCA paper P4, Advanced Financial Management. Now, we started the discussion last time about the CFO's role in a business organization with regard to corporate governance expectations and also the expectations of stakeholders. So it was a rather broad context. Well, today we're going to broaden the context even further and look at the external influences acting on a business organization, i.e. we will consider the economic environment in general for business organizations. As an executive climbs through the ranks in an organization, ultimately aspiring to reach the top levels, he or she has got to exert leadership, not only internally with regard to employees, but also to be able to articulate in a competent way the goals and the strategies of the company towards external parties. This could be the public in general, it can be towards investors, it can be towards the media, it can even be in testimony in front of governmental bodies, commissions, and even Congress in the United States. So in this way, there is an advocacy role which is played by senior management. And in order to be able to fulfill this role properly, senior management has got to be financially and economically literate. This is absolutely vital in this day and age of media attention which is given to the activities of companies. Just think of BP a couple of years ago during the Gulf of Mexico oil spill, and how important it was to be able to interact with the public in a competent way. That is a major challenge. We're not talking only about PR here, we're talking about the need for a company and its management and leadership to be able to understand what their position is and where they are going, and to be able to explain that to others. Now, as part of the strategy making role of a company, it's very important that the company understands the context in which it is behaving, and the international financial and economic architecture doesn't exist coincidentally. It evolved over time, and therefore it's important and incumbent for business leaders to understand the institutions and the mechanisms that exist at the not only the domestic level, of course, in which the company is located, but at the international level. And this is more true than ever before, given the impact of globalization. Now, since World War II, a number of institutions have arisen at the international level. One doesn't have to have a deep, detailed knowledge, of course, of these institutions, but it's important to understand where they came from and why they exist. As one philosopher said, those who do not understand the past are condemned to repeating it, and this is actually quite true. One needs to understand what the trends are, and trends are determined or indicated by what path we have traveled, both individually and collectively and as organizations. Look, the World Trade Organization, for example, has existed, or not in name, but in it's also its early manifestation. It was inspired by in the aftermath of World War II, when there was a great interest to liberalize trade and to facilitate trade between countries, because the idea was not only to an economic motive to increase wealth between countries, which is what trade has helped to do, but of course there was also a political motivation. That was that companies that trade with each other hopefully will have less reason to go to war with one another. Very much in the limelight in the last few years with the global financial crisis is the International Monetary Fund, which has its mission looking for a way to reform and stabilize the international financial architecture. It does this in coordination with the World Bank, which is focusing on the developing world. Then you have more obscure institutions like the Bank of International Settlements, which has been also associated with the efforts at banks to come up with international rules regarding capital adequacy standards. Very, very important issue, because the banks are one kind of institution which are susceptible, A, to periodic crises and problems, and B, they're very central, they're at the nerve center of economic systems. So if banks fail, the rest of the economy is in trouble. And the other dimension, of course, is that bank failures can be transmitted across borders very, very quickly, and that's why it's important at the international level that there be a great degree of coordination between regulatory authorities. Having mentioned regulatory authorities, this would be another reason why it's important for senior management in companies to be financially and economically literate, meaning educated in these issues. It's because it's in the self-interest of companies that they educate the government and educate the lawmakers and have an influence in how the regulations are constructed. The companies nowadays cannot afford to take a completely passive role and let the lawmakers pass regulations, because lawmakers are not running businesses, and therefore they may come up with solutions that are not practical, or in fact even injurious to the best interests of companies, the industries in which they are acting, and possibly injurious to the best interests of the public at large. This is why the involvement of business in advising and consulting lawmakers on the construction of or development of regulations is a legitimate and important area. I think this is certainly acknowledged. Also, the role of central banks. Never before has this been so important. The central banks coordinate their activities across borders in order to achieve stability in financial systems in various countries. In Europe, the euro itself is, of course, constantly at the center of a major debate as to whether it has been a good thing for individual countries to give up their monetary sovereignty, as we call this. In other words, not to be able to give up the right to be able to print their own currency and to submit to the central authority of the European Central Bank, which of course is the authority over the euro itself. In fact, there are current advocates that say that the euro zone may have to be reconfigured or redesigned, possibly short of a full breakup, but to somehow achieve a working arrangement that does not disadvantage those countries like Greece and others in the southern part of Europe that are very much disadvantaged in not being able to pursue some, or to have some room for maneuverability in arranging their own financial and economic affairs. So this is very much a open question and an important debate. And coming back to managements of companies, senior managements at major companies have a big influence on how the debate is develops in these matters. So they cannot remain silent. They have to be visible, and they have to come with their own suggestions and ideas and observations. This is why this chapter summarizes why it's extremely important for a company, for its own interests, to understand what kind of institutions and mechanisms out there can influence the and affect and even threaten the well-being of a business organization. Thank you, and until next time.